Welcome to Upfront. I'm Mary Ruth Harris. Joining us is Rachel Blaney, the MP for North Island-Powell River. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you spending your time? How do you split it between Ottawa and your constituency here?
Well, basically, you are in Ottawa about half of the year. People often don't know that. During the winter, we have between 5 or 6 weeks where we're in the riding, and then during the summer, usually most of the summer, including a large part of September. But after that, usually we're home 1 week a month, and every once in a while 2 weeks a month, but the rest of the time we're in Ottawa.
Wow.
It adds up.
What's the most interesting thing for you about living in Ottawa?
Well, the living part, it's kind of funny because in some ways you're absolutely there, but I don't sort of spend time wandering around the city as much as people who actually live there probably do because the focus is so much on the work. But it's an honor to live somewhere really close to Parliament, to be able to see that building, to work in that building and understand the history of our country in the context of what's happened in that place. The hardest part to adapt to living here on the beautiful coast, of course, is the very cold weather and the ice. And, you know, I remember when I first started working there, it was raining during the cold season, and it hurts because it's ice rain. And then when I got into my office, I took off my jacket and I could literally hear the ice cracking off my jacket. And I thought, you know, this never happens back home. I certainly need to get back home as soon as possible.
Now, you guys are faced with so many different issues in Ottawa. So we're going to run down the list. So let's start with the Phoenix pay system.
Okay.
There are federal employees in every province, in every city across Canada.
Yeah.
And some of them aren't getting paid at all. Some of them are getting more than they should. Some are getting much less than they should. Some have even lost their homes and are facing divorce and family upheaval because they're not getting paid appropriately. What is taking so long in fixing it?
Well, I think first I just want to say how much I recognize and acknowledge the amazing work of our public servants. With the Phoenix pay system, people haven't got paid on time. People haven't got paid at all. People are getting paid half-time when they work full-time. It just seems like the end of the story is never going to come. So I really appreciate them staying dedicated. They're showing up to their work. They're doing their jobs every day. And I think that's a huge testament.
Even though they're not getting paid?
Even though they're not getting paid. I'm just been totally astonished by their dedication to this country and to the people that they serve.
Okay.
So why is it taking so long? I think that's an excellent question. And why are people having to wait so long? You know, there are people that haven't been paid in months. And for me, as a person who ran a nonprofit agency before this, I was in charge of making sure my staff were paid. And we just made sure that happened. And so when you look at what's happening to those families and to those individuals, it's just been heartbreaking. So it's hard to say.
Why can't they just write them a check and fix it?
Exactly. That's what I've asked. I've asked the minister a few times, you know, where's the person that just writes the check? Because people just need to eat. You know, we had one person come and tell our office, you know, I'm just grateful to my friends because they're actually helping feed us during this time because we have nothing. All the money that I am getting, I'm putting towards our mortgage and paying the basic essentials. And so people are feeding us. And so, you know, it's just been heartbreaking. And we've spent over $1 billion at this point trying to remedy this. And, you know, really this was a plan that the Conservatives came up with. In terms of the implementation, that's been done by the Liberals, and it just keeps falling apart. And I don't know how much taxpayer money should really go into fixing a system that is so essentially broken.
Exactly.
At what point is it going to get fixed?
Exactly.
Is it reasonable that that business continues to get paid? You know, it's just shocking. And the hardest part is what's happening to families.
Right.
You know, you think about money troubles that you have in your own household and how stressful that is. And so families are in the brink of sometimes some terrible crisis because they've been dealing with this for over a year in some cases.
So is the minister setting out some goalposts on a monthly basis that, okay, by this month we're going to do this and by the next month we're going to do this? Is that happening, or is he just sitting back and throwing up his hands?
Well, it's a woman actually who's the minister. But you know, there's been multiple goalposts during this process, and every time it's like that goalpost gets extended again. And so families are waiting for that to get fixed and just want to know. And can you imagine just not knowing if you're going to get paid? You're working, you're showing up every day, you're doing your job, but you just don't know. And, you know, and some people are getting back paid from previous years and this year, and so then their taxes are going to get raised with their income tax, but they got underpaid the last year. So there's just nothing but a mess, and it just keeps getting thicker and messier and more awful.
So how long is the opposition going to sit and wait? Like, how long until everybody just goes, all right, enough is enough?
Well, those conversations have happened in the House of Commons where we've asked again, and we keep asking again and again. And what the minister keeps doing is she keeps standing up and saying, this is not okay, and this is so important to us, and yet people are suffering. So, you know, it's one of those situations where I don't know who's doing what, but it's not getting done. And one of the things that was most disheartening last year was a lot of the workers got a bonus that were working with the pay system. And, you know, people who were not getting paid were just totally upset by that because they hadn't got paid, but the people who were implementing the program got a bonus for their hard work.
Why would they get a bonus for?
That's a good question. You know, and I don't know, maybe they were working tons extra hours, but this is not a good time. When people are not getting their own paycheck, you don't give other people a bonus on top of that. So it's just not good practice, and it doesn't build that sense of comradeship that I think is so important.
So there's really no answer on the horizon.
There really isn't. And there's a lot of, we're just going to be putting more and more, dumping more and more money into this. And all I can say is, you know, sometimes you have to let go of something that you spent a lot of money so that you can get something that works and that's affordable for people.
Correct.
So I encourage the minister to just make sure this is done. And in the meantime, make sure that there's staff on hand that will just write the check so that these people get paid, so they can do their mortgage, so that they can look after their children and they're not put in a place where they're hungry.
All right. Now, with the pay system, that's one aspect around pay. The other is pay equity between women and men. Again, Iceland has pulled it off. Why can't we? What is taking so long in giving women the same level of pay that a man gets?
So one of the first motions that came forward in the House in this term was on pay equity, and that was from the NDP. And they said, let's have a committee, let's get down to the bottom of this, because how is it in Canada in 2016 that we still have this issue? So now here we are in 2018, and that issue still has not been addressed. So the committee got together, they did a very comprehensive report, and what they proposed to the House is that they needed to have some serious legislation that looked at where this was happening and made sure that women were no longer getting paid, in some cases, 74 cents to a man's dollar. You know, it is 2018 now, so it's definitely time that we just get paid the fair share. Exactly. And so when that came forward to the House, we were actually really appalled, because what we heard from the government was, we're going to get to legislation sometime in 2018. And it's one of those things where you're like, well, why do people have to wait? Why do women have to wait? How much longer do they have to wait? This has been an ongoing issue for generations. And so now we're asking women again to wait a couple more years. So we're going to be waiting in 2018. Finally, the year is here where legislation should come before the House. We should be having a comprehensive discussion about it. But again, why the waiting? And I just hope that it finally happens, because we need to deal with this issue. Women should be paid for the same work, the same amount.
Well, I think that this issue in particular has come to the forefront because of the Time's Up movement. Just last week, a perfect example of this was what happened between Mark Wahlberg and Michele Williams. They both were called back to work on a movie. They put in the same amount of time. He was paid $1.5 million and she got a couple of $100. And because she knew she was going to get just the per day per diem, whatever it was. So when that came out, and they worked for the same agent, I can't think that that's going to continue. He actually turned around and donated the entire $1.5 million to the Time's Up fund that has been created. And that is just, that's the way it should be. Like, to have equal pay between men and women is just the way it should be. Iceland has done it, and I understand you've recently had an opportunity to interact with the minister from Iceland.
Well, it was with a member of parliament from Iceland. And one of the things that's really important that she talked to me about is the fact that in their parliament, women are 48% of that.
48%.
And so you're looking at the reality that in Canada, we are at the highest ever at about 26%. And so, you know, yesterday I was talking to the Campbell River youth group that works with the city council. And, I said to the young women there, I think everybody should run for politics if they have that in their heart. But I really encourage women, because there's a lot of the right women out there to do the job. The question is, why aren't we asking them to do that job? So when we look at some of these things that are happening around women not being paid the same amount as men, when we look at the Me Too and Time's Up movement, we know that there's something happening for women across the world where we're standing up and saying it's time for us to take this space and start to ask questions about what are the barriers that block us from taking these spaces. And what I have to say about Iceland is they've done a lot of really good work around creating an environment where women were engaged more, because it isn't, what I hear when that comes up is, well, it should be the right person. Absolutely, it should be the right person. The question we have to ask ourselves is, why aren't we asking women to be the right person?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's a really good question.
Well, and I think about my journey into politics and how much support I got by women. I think of years ago, Fran Jones, who's not with us anymore, who was a business owner in Campbell River, and she spent a lot of time talking to me about why women weren't in politics and what she could do to support women to be part of politics and engage in that process. So I think it's really important that women stand up and support one another to do these things. And I look in the House of Commons and how many women are bringing their children and their babies into Parliament, and they're voting and they're doing speeches with their babies with them. And so, and this is the beautiful thing about that, is what you start to see is men bringing their babies into the House of Commons as well, because the women are setting a standard of engaging. So we have to look at what are the barriers and how can we break down those barriers so that we can have more equal treatment in our society.
Okay. So we're going to make a left turn at this point around protection of all of those generations that are here now and coming in the future. Let's talk about NATO, because I understand that there's some very active NATO discussions happening right now, and that you are involved in some of the committee work. So if you'd like to kind of explain to us where those discussions stand right now.
So I have the great honor of being one of the representatives of Canada in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And about 2 or 3 times a year, all of those countries come together, and it's all the parliamentarians, and we have conversations about what's happening in the world. And there's a lot of things that are happening in the world right now that are a little bit scary, and I think people are starting to be more and more concerned about that. And one of the things I appreciate about being a part of that is the opportunity to talk with other countries about what they're doing and how they're moving forward, and realizing we're not alone. And when you're in these conversations with a lot of the European countries, you start to hear from them a story that we don't hear as much here in Canada. They're concerned about what's happening in Russia and some of that lack of stability. But at the end of the day, what all of the countries are very strong in is, how do we work together to prevent any kind of action, any kind of war before it happens? How do we deal with some of these issues of populism in our countries? How do we make sure that we're supporting people so that we don't see some of those terrorist activities happen?
Is there, on the part of parliamentarians, is there a consensus of how to deal with unstable leadership? Because I can think of 3 off the top of my head. I will not name them, but I can think of 3 unstable leaders currently on the world stage, maybe even 4, that would be in a position of causing great harm to many. So is there some consensus among the parliamentarians from all the different countries on how to deal with them?
Not always is there a total consensus in the action. I think the goals are very similar. I think people want to look at, how do we create a more stable environment when something is becoming unstable? What do we do to work together collaboratively? And how do we address some of those issues? Sometimes the way that people want to go to get there is a little bit different. One of the things that's very concerning for me is, what are we going to do about nuclear disarmament? And right now, Canada hasn't stepped up as a leader in terms of nuclear disarmament. It's something that we've been asking the Prime Minister repeatedly. Why aren't you stepping up on this issue? We need as many countries as possible stepping up and saying this is something we need to move towards. I had one young person asking me yesterday, when I was presenting to them about this very issue. Because I think about, when I was a kid, it was the Cold War, and there was a lot of
Yes.
concern about sort of the lack of
Right.
stability and anything that could happen. And I think young people are really seeing this in a new way. And they knew very clearly, and they said this to me, if we have one nuclear bomb go, we know that it's done.
Right.
So we need to get rid of that. And so I think what's really important that we find ways to be listening to young people across the country and across the world, because they're the young people that are going to move forward, and they need to know that we're doing what we can in terms of diplomacy to make sure that that never happens.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you have, I realize we're jumping all over the map from Phoenix Pay System to Equity Pay to NATO, and now we're going to come to something, an issue that is very, very divisive here locally on Vancouver Island, and that's salmon farming, salmon fish farms.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a minute.
Well, one of the things I definitely knew that coming into this job, that this is a very divisive issue. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is the reality is that in this riding, we all live here, we all want to stay here, and we all want to make that we have as much stability as we possibly can. One of the other members of Parliament presented a private member's bill before the House that was on close containment, and I was a strong supporter of that. Okay. And I think it's really important that people understand the process. Okay. If a bill comes before the House and it's voted on and it's a positive vote, the first thing that bill does is go to a committee where there's a really in-depth conversation. Okay. And I would have loved to have that conversation. And I think the people in this riding would have liked to have that conversation about what's happening in terms of fish farms, what's happening in terms of protecting our ocean. I don't think fish farms are the only reason that we're having so many challenges with our oceans, but we know that there's something happening there and we need to protect our oceans. Right. And I have to say, I'm very concerned how many people have lost their jobs who used to fish on the ocean. Right. Generations of families who are no longer able to catch the wild salmon. So I think all of us should understand, and I think for the most part we do, that protecting wild salmon has to be absolutely key in everything that we do. And I think close containment is an important next step. And in fact, across the world, close containment is where many countries are moving in terms of making sure that they're creating the food that is making the income. North Island is a perfect place to have close containment because you need to have it close to the ocean. And where else can you afford to have that?
Can you decipher for us the difference between closed containment and what we have now?
Yeah, so right now we have open net farms. And so that means they're right in the ocean, and there's a lot of concern. And the Cohen Commission came out several years ago, and one of the main statements of that was, let's get those open net fish farms off the fish migration routes. Okay. So the Cohen Commission has not even fully been implemented. In fact, a big part of it has not been implemented.
How come?
So there's a lot of... DFO hasn't made it a priority. There's been discussions about it, but it actually hasn't happened. Okay. So, when you look at what's happening right now where we have people occupying fish farms, we have Indigenous communities that are being very strong about how they feel. I'm disheartened by the fact that the great need for collaboration, the great need for conversation is not happening. And Marine Harvest was very clear. This is a rights and title issue, and that is really something that the federal government has to come and be a part of. And I've stood up in the House of Commons and I've invited the minister to our riding to have this very conversation.
So that closed containment bill, did it pass or no?
It did not pass, which was really unfortunate.
Why did it not pass? You've got people voting on it that don't live anywhere near the coast. Were they voting no for what reason?
Well, they just voted no. They didn't think there was any reason to move forward with that. And I think of a report that the Chamber of Commerce did about 3 years ago. And one of the things that they talked about in that report, which said, how could Canada do better financially? Right. What could we do to build the economy? And one of the things they said was, we don't invest enough in research and development. And often we do a little bit of research and development, and then other countries take that core research and take it to the next level, and they're the ones who make the money on it. So what I really feel passionately about is, why isn't this a way that we can move forward and really become the leaders in close containment and be selling our knowledge and our wisdom and what we've created to other countries, and seeing that really build a more robust economy in our riding. At the core of it, though, we definitely need to have that conversation, and it's too bad that that's not happening.
And how much longer do you think it'll be before you can actually have that conversation and convince the minister to come here for that discussion?
Well, I will continue to invite the minister to come here and have these conversations. It's putting a lot of stress on families right now, both the workers of the fish farm and the Indigenous communities and all the communities supporting them.
Right.
So, you know, and it's interesting to me because I had somebody come from the National Aquaculture Group, and they talked about how they were supporters of the Cohen Commission. And I said, let's all get on behind this together. If this is something that we can agree on here, let's do it. But when it comes to the protection of the ocean, I think the other part that's really important is we have a lot of shellfish farmers in our riding who have really been struggling because of the changes in the ocean, and their businesses are really suffering. So we need to make sure that we're looking at the ocean and we're doing what we can to protect it so that we can have as much robustness and health that also is good for our economy. It helps with our tourism. It helps with the people out there fishing our shellfish farms.
Right.
We really need to be looking at the oceans and protecting them so much better than we are today.
Okay. So I have a question. If anybody in your constituency wanted to write to a particular minister about a particular issue, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, I want to remind everybody that when you write to me or to a minister in Ottawa, it's absolutely free. I just think that's really important because people still send me letters. It's free, and they put stamps on there, and I'm like, don't waste your dollar. You know, I want you to get me the information. So when people write the minister, I always ask them if they please would CC me as well, just so that I know that it's happened. If I agree or if I disagree is really irrelevant. I believe that people have a right to hear from their elected officials. And if I'm advocating for somebody to get a response from a minister, I'm happy to do that. But I need to see the letter and know it's there before I can do it.
Because if somebody sent a letter to a minister and didn't copy you, then you have no way of
Then I have no
following up.
idea. And I always remind people, you know, I don't have this great big brain that knows absolutely everything yet. I'm getting closer every day. But, you know, if people want me to know about a particular issue, they absolutely should let me know, because I'm willing to have those conversations. But I can't if I don't know the issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anonymous letters or signed letters?
Well, if you sign something anonymously, you're not going to get a response because nobody knows who you are. So if you want a response from myself or the minister, you definitely need to leave some contact information so that me or the minister can get back to you.
Okay. What would you say to young people that are just starting on their journey through adult life about becoming involved in some level of politics, whether it be municipal, provincial, federal?
Well, you know, one of the things that has had a huge impact on me has been with young people, has been how many university programs have partnered with the House of Commons. And I've had numerous students come and spend the day with me in Ottawa. So something that we've done very informally in the riding is do a day with your MP. And so we've had several students let us know that they're interested. So if there's any young people out there that would love to spend a day with me here in the riding, please call our office and we'll do our best to accommodate that, because we just want to see people engaged.
Oh, that's super.
And so for me, I think, you know, listen to the news, do a lot more research, ask your MP to talk to you about different issues, any of your elected officials. I know, you know, all the people that I represent in government federally, or not federally, because that's me, but provincially and municipally and in regional districts. So many of them are really excited to have conversations with young people about the things that they do. So I think young people should really reach out, because there's a lot of friendly people out there who would love to tell you what it's like to be a mayor or a member of council or an MLA. So I think it's about really including yourself and doing anything. You know, anytime you give to your community, if it's volunteering at a local nonprofit or helping somebody out, you really start to understand the politics, and everything we do has some sort of political connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
And particularly in targeting women to get involved, What are the women like yourself that are actually currently in Parliament? Have you guys had conversations about how to make it more attractive for women to be involved, or how to get them involved?
Absolutely. And a lot of those programs are young women that are coming to spend a day with women MPs and really get a sense of what the reality is.
Okay.
So I think we have to look at what doors are closed and how do we open them. You know, one of another private member's bill that came about a year ago before the House was about encouraging parties to have more women candidates, and that there would be a fiscal response that wasn't positive if they didn't have that. Now, it wasn't a huge response. It's about some of the money that you get back from the government after
Right.
you've spent money. It wasn't a huge, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was something that just sort of encouraged all the parties to go out and look for those amazing women in their communities that might want to serve.
Okay.
Because there's sort of this, and I mean, we see it because 74% of the MPs around the House of Commons are men. So there continues to be who's the best man for the job instead of who's the best person for the job,
Right.
and looking at who are those women who can be the best person. So I hope that parties will continue to do that, because there's a process before you become a candidate, right?
Right.
You run for a nomination. So it's important.
Right.
And the NDP actually has policy where it's like it needs to be 50-50. So you get out
Okay.
there and you recruit some amazing women who will be willing to run for the
Okay.
nomination and then run for this particular
Great.
seat across Canada.
Well, this has been very fascinating, and it's sad that there's no answer for the Phoenix system yet. It's a little bit tragic that we do not have equity pay yet. Would really like to see that resolved in the near future, not just in the government ranks, but also in
Across
private
the
ranks
board.
across Canada. The salmon discussion, that's not going away, and I do hope that you will continue to pursue that to help everybody come to an agreement and a resolution on that. And thank you for the work that you do, because I know it's not easy, and a lot of late night reading all of those briefs. Good way to put you to sleep sometimes.
Yeah.
And the travel that you have to do, that must be, it's very hard for people to do that when they have families, and for the toll that it's taking on your own life. But thank you for your service and your sacrifice.
Well, thank you. It's a huge honor. I have to say that when I stand up in the House of Commons, I'm very clear that I serve the best riding in Canada. The people here have been so resilient after so many challenges, and the sense of community. And during the Christmas season, which we just had, boy, can you see how strong that is. People come together here. So regardless of your political affiliation, the people here are good people, and I'm incredibly proud to serve them.
All right. Well, thank you again, and thank you for joining us today,
Thank you.
Rachel. You've been watching Up Front. I'm Mary Ruth Harris. Join us again.